Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending where you are. Very excited to be moderating this session today, in which our MSPH students are going to present their master's essay. And today we have the great pleasure of having four presentations. Just so everyone knows and it's on the same page that each student is going to have 10 minutes to give their presentation. And after each presentation, we're going to have 5 minutes for questions. So please, if you have your questions, it's better if you can speak up after the presentation, or if you don't want to speak, then you can just type it in the chat and I can read it so the students can answer the questions. The first presenter today is Avery Snarponis, and I'm excited to look at his presentation as I was Avery's advisor. Avery's area of interest is maternal, fetal, and perinatal health. Avery came to the program with a Bachelor of Arts from San Diego State University with a major in psychology. Today, she's going to be presenting her work on postpartum depressive symptoms in a community-based setting, the associations with social support and economic hardship among Spanish-speaking women in Maryland. Avery, the floor is yours, and if you can start sharing your screen, please.
Can you see it? Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Avery, and today I'll be presenting on postpartum depressive symptoms and how they relate to social support and economic hardship among Spanish-speaking women in Maryland. This topic is very important because postpartum mental health doesn't just affect the mother, but also infant development, bonding, and overall family well-being. So understanding what factors might protect against or contribute to these symptoms is really critical from a public health perspective. Postpartum depression is a significant public health concern, with research showing that a substantial proportion of women experience depressive symptoms during the postpartum period. Prior research has identified several factors associated with postpartum mental health. In particular, social support has consistently been shown to act as a protective factor, while economic hardship has been associated with increased risk. However, there is still limited research examining how these factors operate among Spanish-speaking women in community-based settings, which is the focus of this study. The goal of this study was to examine associations between social support, economic hardship, and postpartum depressive symptoms among Spanish-speaking perinatal women in early learning centers in Maryland. More specifically, I was interested in understanding which of these factors might be more strongly associated with depressive symptoms in this population. This was a cross-sectional secondary analysis of baseline data from the Mothers and Babies virtual group trial. The sample included 199 Spanish-speaking perinatal women recruited from early learning centers in Maryland. These early learning centers are important because they serve as community-based settings that are often more accessible and trusted by families, which makes them very valuable setting for studying and delivering mental health interventions. Depressive symptoms were measured using the Center for Epidemiologic Studies Depression Scale, or CESD, which is a widely used self-report measure of depressive symptom severity. Social support was measured using the multidimensional scale of perceived social support, or MSPSS, which assesses perceived support from family, friends, and significant others. Economic hardship was measured using food insecurity, assessed with a short form household food security scale, which captures access to adequate food as an indicator of financial strain. Age was also included as a covariate in the analysis to account for potential differences across participants. I first calculated descriptive statistics to summarize the sample and conducted t-tests to compare groups. Then I used multiple linear regression to examine associations between social support, food insecurity, and depressive symptom severity while controlling for age. This allowed me to understand the independent contribution of each variable to depressive symptoms. About 23% of participants had elevated depressive symptoms. Lower perceived social support was significantly associated with higher depressive symptom severity. This suggests that individuals with less support may be at greater risk for experiencing depressive symptoms. However, food insecurity and age were not significantly associated with depressive symptoms in this model. So while economic hardship is often considered a risk factor, it was not a significant predictor in this particular sample. Overall, the model explained about 17% of the variance in depressive symptoms. This suggests that while these variables are important, there are also other factors that contribute to postpartum mental health. These findings suggest that social support may play a more central role in postpartum mental health than economic hardship in this population. One possible explanation is that social support has a more direct impact on emotional well-being, particularly during the postpartum period. It is also possible that economic hardship influences mental health more indirectly, or that the community-based setting provides support that may buffer its impact. Overall, this highlights the importance of considering both social and structural factors when studying maternal mental health. There are, of course, several limitations to consider. First, the sample excluded individuals with more severe depression, which may have reduced variability in symptoms. Additionally, the cross-sectional design limits our ability to draw causal conclusions. And finally, the missing data also reduce the analytic sample, which may impact generalizability. Overall, these findings highlight the importance of social support in postpartum mental health. Strengthening support networks in community-based settings may be an effective strategy for prevention, particularly among Latina mothers. These findings may help inform future interventions and public health efforts aimed at improving maternal mental health outcomes. That's all.
Thank you, Avery. I'm going to open the floor now to questions. If anyone has any questions, please can you raise your hand or you can just unmute yourself and ask the question. Thank you. And I don't see anything in the chat.
So, Avery, this is Cynthia. Terrific job on such an important issue. So I'm sort of curious, were you surprised by the results? Were you expecting that you might find, relationships, or not surprised given the structural and social factors that you talked about?
Yeah, I wasn't super surprised about the social support aspect. I was surprised about the food insecurity or like economic hardship aspect, but I think that is a bit harder to like qual not like qualify, but kind of get in a study just because there are so many like aspects to it. But so I was surprised that that wasn't significantly associated. And age, I don't think has any like real indication on like if you're more likely to experience postpartum depressive symptoms. So yeah, I wasn't like super surprised overall, but it was just kind of interesting to see.
Thanks.
Kristen?
Yeah, great job. I'll have a follow-up to that. So, just if you were going to design this study again based on the same sample, like what additional factors would you like to have studied that you think may have resonated more?
That's a good question. I think I would like to know like how many adults are within the household that they're in, because that um can get into more of like the nitty-gritty of like the social support.
Mhm.
And if like more like family dynamic aspects, just in that general realm of stuff, I guess.
The more family support kind of thing,
Mhm.
okay, gotcha. hmm Thanks.
Thanks, Cynthia and Kristen, for asking questions. Avery, I have one more question because I see that there are some students online. So I was just wondering if you can tell us how it is that you decided to use this topic for your master's essay, how you got access to this data set, and tell us a little bit more about that interaction, please.
So I looked at the spreadsheet that you guys sent us with like all of the possible readers and their topics, and my reader was Dr. Rihanna Platt. She's a psychiatrist at Bayview. and she did a study, the one I mentioned, the Mothers and Babies virtual group. And so that really lined up with my own personal research interest of postpartum mental health, just generally. So I just sent her an email. I was like, hey, your research looks really interesting, and I'm super into that field because it's so under-researched and undervalued. So I just hopped on a Zoom call with her and it kind of pled my case with her a little bit. But and then how I got access to the data, I didn't have to like do like any crazy IRB things, but I think that's also because the study was like over. I don't know if that has any impact on that, but so she also, I think it helped that she was like one of the PIs on the study. So I think that definitely helps with getting access to the data. Um, but yeah, I think that answered the questions you asked.
Yep. Thank you, Avery. Thanks for sharing how you identify your topic. So great presentation. Thank you. I don't see any hands ups or questions in the chat, so we can move to our next presenter. Our next presenter is Chelsea Richardson, who I was also very happy to be her advisor. Chelsea's area of interest in the program was also maternal, fetal, and perinatal health. And Chelsea came to the program with a Master of Science from Wake Forest University with a major in biomedical science. And today, Chelsea is going to be presenting her essay that the topic is on the importance of play spaces on child health and what matters most. Chelsea, mic is yours.
Thank you, Carolina. Is everyone able to see that okay? Okay, perfect. So hi everyone, my name is Chelsea Richardson, and today I will be presenting my master's work titled The Importance of Play Spaces on Child Health, What Matters Most. My project examines the role of play spaces in supporting child health and development, the growing decline in their use, and the broader public health implications of this shift. In my presentation, I will also explore the key determinants driving this decline and highlight evidence-based strategies to improve play space utilization at the population level. My chosen topic is informed by my work at the Johns Hopkins Center for Indigenous Health, where I contribute to the Lego Spirit Project, supporting culturally grounded, community-guided place-based development in Indigenous communities. I also work as a research assistant on Project Vital with Dr. Chris and Mari, examining how greening vacant lots in Baltimore City impacts youth physical and mental well-being. Through these experiences, I've seen how community-based, culturally grounded approaches shape child health outcomes. So to begin, a play space can most be holistically described as a spacious, secluded environment. It can be indoor or outdoor, and it can be nature-based or structured with selected built equipment where children are free to engage in physical activity. Children most often engage with play spaces through school, daycare centers, recreation centers, and various community sites that can be both private and public. While all children engage with play spaces and are affected by their offerings, the number and quality of play spaces drastically varies across U.S. cities. Children's playtime has declined significantly. Between 1981 and 1997, free playtime decreased by 25%, and I presume that this percentage has increased much more since then. At the same time, children are spending up to 3 times more time on screens. So these statistics reflect a major cultural shift away from active self-directed play towards sedentary behaviors. Yet there continues to be really strong intervention evidence that shows when children are given access to safe play spaces, physical activity levels can increase by up to 84% compared to control neighborhoods. So play spaces influence child health across developmental, physical, and social emotional domains. Research shows that different play environments support different aspects of development. Indoor play is more strongly associated with cognitive development like learning, problem solving, and creativity, while outdoor play doubles children's physical activity levels and significantly increases time spent in moderate to vigorous activity. This is really important given that children are recommended to engage in at least 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity daily, but many don't actually meet this threshold. A study conducted across 5 Danish countries found that only 1/3 or 33% of children ages 6 to 9 achieved 60 minutes of daily moderate to vigorous physical activity. Sorry. Okay. So to summarize the pathway of this issue, decreased play space utilization leads to decreased child playtime, which causes increased sedentary behavior like gaming, watching TV, or engaging with various forms of social media, all contributing to worse health outcomes like obesity and cardiometabolic disease, worse academic outcomes, cognitive and social deficits, worsened ADHD symptoms, poor sleep quality, reduced social cohesion, and poor mental health overall. This creates a reinforcing cycle where reduced play leads to worse health and developmental outcomes, which further limits play opportunities in children's lives. So now that I've hopefully convinced you that we can see play spaces are not just simple recreational spaces, but they can be modifiable environments that are able to produce measurable improvements in population health, and that we should view them as a preventative public health infrastructure. So to understand this decline in play space utilization, it is critical to identify some potential underlying determinants. First being general disinterest. Children increasingly prefer screen-based activities such as video games and social media, which are often perceived to be more engaging, exciting, and competitive. Many children report that digital play is simply just more enjoyable than traditional outdoor play, and this shift contributes to reduced motivation to seek out play spaces altogether. Second, user dissatisfaction. Even when play spaces are available, most children report that they are unengaging or not designed to meet their needs. Playgrounds are often built with equipment that primarily caters to younger children, leaving most older children disengaged. Children have expressed desire for more interactive and stimulating environments. Third, safety concerns. Safety is a major barrier for both children and parents. Children report avoiding play spaces due to fears of bullying, gang activity, and exposure to unsafe behaviors, while parents often express more concerns about stranger danger and community violence. In some urban settings, children even describe avoiding public spaces entirely or limiting their use to certain times of the day, like daytime only. And fourth, parental influence. Parental decision-making plays a critical role in shaping children's play behaviors. Many parents prioritize structured activities over unstructured play due to rising academic pressures and social expectations, which also contributes to a broader shift where free play is really undervalued. Time constraints and supervision requirements further limit opportunities for spontaneous play. Children are often only allowed to play in controlled environments or when an adult is present. Parents' own time limitations and other responsibilities can also restrict children's access to play spaces. And finally, accessibility and proximity. Access to play spaces is very uneven and also reflects broader structural inequities. Children living further away, particularly more than 1 mile, are significantly less likely to use them, and those relying on cars or public transit visit less often than those who are able to walk or bike. Accessibility is also a concern for children with disabilities, as many play spaces lack fully inclusive infrastructure despite ADA guidelines. These barriers disproportionately impact children in low-income, rural, and marginalized communities where play spaces are often fewer, lower in quality, and less safely maintained. These determinants highlight that decreased play space utilization is not simply a matter of individual choice, but it's shaped by structural, social, and environmental factors that require a multi-level public health intervention. So now let's take a look at evidence of best practices and who our target audience should be to apply these recommendations in real practice. So despite the challenges I mentioned, there are clear evidence-based strategies to improve play space utilization, which target structural barriers like access and infrastructure, and social barriers like individual perceptions and behaviors. So first, increasing collaboration with community and non-governmental organizations is a critical strategy for addressing funding, design, and maintenance challenges associated with play spaces. Public-private partnerships can help address funding gaps while ensuring play spaces reflect community needs. For example, Kaboom, a development organization, has partnered with communities like Baltimore City to build and renovate play spaces in underserved areas. Another strong example is the Lego Spirit Project, led by the Johns Hopkins Center for Indigenous Health and funded by the Lego Foundation, which received $27.8 million to develop culturally relevant play spaces alongside Indigenous communities. These models emphasize community input and co-design, which increase both utilization and long-term sustainability. Second, improving school recess policies. Because schools are one of the primary environments where children access play spaces, policies that extend and protect recess time can help ensure that all children have consistent opportunities for active play. Current evidence suggests that increasing recess duration from approximately 30 minutes to 60 minutes can help children meet these recommended physical activity levels. Policies that also focus on prohibiting the removal of recess as punishment are especially important because this practice disproportionately affects children in lower socioeconomic settings and further limits their access to play. So, strengthening recess policies is effective, but also provides an equity-driven intervention. And lastly, public health campaigns play an important role in addressing social and behavioral barriers to play space use. Educational initiatives can help reframe play as essential to child health. When parents understand its benefits, they're more likely to prioritize it, and these campaigns can also address concerns around safety and access. So these strategies are particularly powerful because they are effective at increasing play space utilization, but are also scalable and capable of producing population-level improvements in child health outcomes. So, to conclude, there are four key takeaways. First, play is declining while sedentary behaviors are increasing. Second, play spaces are essential for children's physical and developmental health. Third, barriers to play space use are largely structural, including access, safety design, and social norms. And finally, solutions do exist through community investment, policy change, and education. And ultimately, reinvesting in play spaces is not just about recreation, it's about advancing child health equity and improving long-term population health outcomes. So that brings me to the end of my presentation, and I thank you all for your time and attention. I would also just like to acknowledge Dr. Kristen Mari, my faculty reader, and Kristen McCormick for their guidance and support throughout my project, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chelsea. Excellent job. Now let's open the round for questions. Oh, I see Deepti has her hand up. Deepti?
Hi, Chelsea. Great job. I just had a quick question about the adolescent population. So, do you have any suggestions about how play space utilization can be improved amongst adolescent populations?
Yes. So actually, through my field placement, I did in-depth interviews with a lot of adolescents. And I think it's encouraging to know that adolescents do visit these play spaces. Oftentimes, it's with younger siblings or younger family members, or they're kind of just like using them as a hangout spot with other friends. So I think it's encouraging that they do use them. And just from like what I learned in my research project, I really think that play space or green space features are what's going to draw them in. For example, they really recommended having more physical workout equipment, which I saw at one park in Baltimore City. And a lot of them voiced that if there were more parks with workout equipment, they would be more willing to go and get their workout in, engaging in that physical activity. Something else that I came across in my essay research was integrating technology with play spaces. So it's called like smart playground design. So, potentially including some form of technology. I was thinking about this last night. Maybe like, I thought it would be really cool if they had like a screen where you could play Just Dance like outside. So, maybe also kind of incorporating technology since they are the biggest users into these play spaces might also be helpful. Great question.
Thanks, Chelsea. Thanks, Deepti. Chelsea, you had a similar question in the chat, so I'm just going to read it, but I think you already gave an answer. But they
Okay.
were asking Alia Lopez if you have any suggestions on how play space utilization can be improved among the adolescent population, which you already gave us a response to that one.
Yeah.
Wait, I have a follow-up. Sorry.
That's
Just
okay.
because we've kind of talked about this, but Deep D touched upon it. But Chelsea, great presentation. I know some of those recommendations you gave were a little bit more long-term. Did you come across any interventions that were short-term for increasing play space access?
Yes, there was one, and there's actually this really nice guide that I just found online. And basically, what it does, it's called Play Streets, and it implements pop-up play spaces on streets that are near like neighborhoods community centers or faith-based organizations. And these events last for a few hours, and they include equipment like bouncy houses, blow-up slides, different kinds of like activity stations. So that's something that I think a community can implement more easily, because designing a play space, actually building it, that can take months to years. That program is actually part of one of our deans, Keisha Pollock Porter. It's one of her projects, actually. So I also thought that that was really cool that I came across other Hopkins people in my research.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Great job.
Thanks, Chelsea. I see Cynthia, your hand is up.
It's a terrific presentation, and it was fun to hear about. So I'm curious, and it kind of alluded to this when you were talking about play streets and other possible sort of shorter term interventions potentially. To what extent do we need to think about play spaces based on what you've learned that have play spaces for adults and children, since we have to get adults to invest and to figure out where resources are coming from to support them and to get their kids to these spaces? Is that a strategy that folks are thinking about play spaces that work for adults and for kids? Maybe it's the community center where there's activities for both at the same time?
Yeah, I think I also thought a little bit about this, and through also my research, I learned that green spaces, so green space typically does encompass some sort of playground or play equipment, but it can also include like trails, benches, and so I think that outdoor green spaces are really good at encompassing not just children, but also older adults, because it gives them space to ride their bike, go for a walk. So it's a little bit more inclusive of everybody rather than just like a designed play space. Um, and it would be really cool if we could implement like some sort of indoor like decompression space in offices that might encourage some sort of physical activity, like a walking pad or something in offices. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Terrific job, Chelsea. We're gonna go to the next presenter so that we are on track to finish this on time. Great presentation, Chelsea. Thanks very much. Our next presenter is Ndondwa Mijoya. Her concentration in the program was child and adolescent health, and Ndondwa came to the program with a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Rochester with a major in health behavior and society and a major in psychology. Today, Ndondwa is going to be presenting her work that was conducted in Accra, Ghana, about the lifeguards as a public health intervention and implementation proposal to reduce drowning among adolescents. Thank you, Ndondwa. The mic is yours, and you can share your screen, please.
Thank you. I do have a bit of a gadget set up, so apologies if it seems like I have wandering eyes. All right. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Great. All right, thanks again for the introduction, and congratulations everybody who is presenting today. Once again, I am Ndondwa, and I'll be presenting an implementation proposal on lifeguards as a public health intervention to reduce drowning among adolescents and young people in Accra, Ghana. So this was actually a project that I got to do as part of my field placement, and have since continued to work on the project. So this is an ongoing study with data collection and analysis pending, so we will not actually have any current data as part of today's presentation, but we're still going to discuss some of the impact and outcomes that we are expecting to see as a result of the study. All right. So what is drowning? I'm pretty sure we're all familiar with what drowning is, but for the sake of just building context for this work and the presentation, we are going to briefly define it. So the WHO defines drowning as the process of experiencing respiratory impairment from submersion or immersion in liquid with fatal or non-fatal outcomes. So drowning is an injury and in most cases preventable. And when we talk about injuries in general, they're actually among the leading causes of death globally, causing over 5 million deaths annually around the globe. So think of falls, suicide, violence, poisoning, road crashes. These are all examples of injuries. And for drowning specifically, there are over 300,000 drowning deaths that are occurring annually. So obviously this means that there are more cases, non-fatal cases that are happening. And when we consider who is most affected, children and young people are the most affected. with children under the age of 5 alone accounting for 25% of all drowning deaths across the globe. And in fact, drowning is the fourth leading cause of death for children aged 1 to 4, and the third leading cause of death for children aged 5 to 14. And over 90% of these deaths are actually occurring in low and middle income countries. So what is the case of drowning in Ghana? So a study that was done by the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, together with the CDC, showed that drowning accounts for 1,360 deaths annually across the country. And they actually did put their metrics across globally reported data and found that their data was giving much higher reporting. So this shows that on a global scale, drowning is severely underreported. Also from the same study, they found that males were at higher risk of drowning. They were 4 times more likely to die as a result of drowning compared with females. Young people and adults aged 20 to 34 and children under the age of 5 were at the highest risk. So we're also seeing some parallels here to the global trends that we discussed in the previous slide. And drowning was found to mostly occur in rivers and oceans and was associated with swimming and boating activities. So in terms of what really is the issue and why we're proposing lifeguards as an intervention, again, the data showed that swimming and boating were the common circumstances during which drowning occurred. So we do see a role of environmental exposure, and Accra is a largely coastal region. So water bodies are extremely accessible and highly frequented all year round. What they also found was an absence of trained rescue personnel that are physically present at these public accessible aquatic areas, which were commonly beaches. So, and we also do see a big gap in community sensitization about water safety and just insufficient enforcement of water safety practices, including signage on the beach or using warning flags when it's not safe to swim, for example. And these are actually themes that came up during our scoping visits that we conducted early last year. So these findings really highlight the need for comprehensive prevention strategies, which really brings us to the solution, lifeguards. So with drowning being a global public health issue, the WHO proposes some domains for drowning prevention, which include governance, policy and legislation for disaster management, data and research, but also community level interventions, which include training skilled personnel for rescue purposes. And essentially, lifeguards provide surveillance to provide rapid rescue response, and they also serve as educators for water safety to beachgoers or just water body users. So these are all addressing key determinants of drowning simultaneously. And given the high exposure to oceanic environments in Accra, we do think that lifeguarding offers a feasible and effective prevention strategy. And we also do see global evidence that lifeguards do work. One of the examples that I highlighted in my paper was from a study that was done in Victoria, Australia, which showed that presence of lifeguards actually increased perceived safety among beachgoers and resulted in adherence to safety flags on beaches and ultimately contributed to reduced risky water interactions. So lifeguards do work, but how well do they work in a low-income, low-resource setting? Thus, our proposal for this lifeguarding intervention, but specifically evaluating the implementation effectiveness of the intervention in reducing drowning. So to give an overview of the intervention will be implemented at a municipal level in the Greater Accra region, starting with high-risk municipals that were identified during the scoping visits, but also consultations with community stakeholders. And the intervention is really made up of 3 main components, which are the recruitment, training, and deployment of certified lifeguards at high-risk beaches. Essentially, the certified lifeguards will be deployed and equipped with rescue equipment. So we actually did conduct our first phase of the implementation late last year in November, and we trained 22 community members from a pilot municipal, and they were trained over a course of 6 days by the Ghana Life Saving and Diving Association, and 20 of them were later certified and deployed at 3 populous beaches along the municipality's beachfront. And they were mostly deployed during weekends and public holidays, which tend to be the busiest beach days. So this base really focused on setting up the training protocol and really just creating a tangible narrative to initiate buy-in from key stakeholders. And the lifeguards will also serve as informants by providing informal water safety messaging to beachgoers. Community engagement is also a very central component to the intervention. And we're also going to be using drone mapping to estimate population exposure and determine the lifeguard density relative to beach size. And this will be key in evaluating the lifeguard response and whether we have enough lifeguards on the beach to actually respond to any incidents. So what is it going to take? A lot of coordinated engagements with different stakeholders. We're talking ministries, but also local stakeholders and the community members themselves. We do need a lot of buy-in from stakeholders to really see drowning as an issue in Ghana, but also see lifeguards as an essential resource for safety. We will need community engagement and ownership as well. As I mentioned, lifeguards are coming from the communities, so we do need community members to see that they can actually volunteer and give themselves to the cause. But we also need strategies for lifeguard retention, which includes refresher trainings for lifeguards, but also just payment strategies. In terms of our expected outcomes and impact, the implementation effectiveness component of the study will be measured using the AIM framework, and our current impact model accounts for key inputs such as community members to be trained, the national and community level stakeholders, and as well as lifeguard trainers. Our two key outcomes in this initial phase are that community members will swim at beaches only when a lifeguard is present. So again, speaking to that sensitization about water safety, and just safety adherence in general. Another key outcome is that lifeguards will be present at selected beaches at designated times with the essential rescue equipment to conduct rescues. And all of these elements bring us to our expected impact, which is a reduction in drowning rates at participating beaches. And we are working with the assumption that the evidence that we've seen at a global level that lifeguards do work is applicable to Ghanaian beaches. So in conclusion, this is actually a picture from our recent training. Drowning in many cases is preventable, but the question really becomes who is there to respond when it does happen and how competent are they? Do they have the equipment that they need? Do they have the resources that they need? And we do believe, just as we've seen with global evidence, that with effective implementation, lifeguard services have the potential to become a key contributor to drowning prevention nationally in Ghana. And the implementation effectiveness approach really allows for that systematic assessment of both the outcomes and the processes to really help us generate evidence that helps us think through and execute scalability and policy integration in the long run. Just a few acknowledgements. I really want to thank Dr. Abdul Bachani, who has been my supervisor over the last 3 years, my essay reader, but also my PI on this project. So thank you so much, Dr. Bachani. Dr. Farah, thank you so much for being my advisor and just your immense support throughout this journey. Dr. Sharvan, who was my first advisor before she transitioned to a different position, thank you so much for all your support. My family and friends, some of whom are here, thank you all for being on this journey with me. And I'm Christian, so I really just have to owe it up to God as well for seeing me through this journey. So thank you all for your time, and over to you, Carolina.
Congratulations, Ndondwa. You did a fantastic job. I enjoy a lot your presentation, especially the last photo that you included of. I am assuming that's part of your field placement.
Well, this was in November, so I wasn't a part of that trip. But I did get to go to Ghana around this time last year, actually, for some scoping visits.
Fantastic. So I don't want to start with questions because I need to open the floor for other people who have any questions, and then we'll see if we have any time left. I do see that there are some comments in the chat. Great job, Ndondwa. Great presentation. Great job, Do. I don't see any questions though. Let me see. I do see that Chingula has her hand up.
Yes, great presentation, Ndondwa. Super proud of you. I think this project is very important, very interesting. So my question is, you did set up really great statistics as to the real life situation in Accra, Ghana. So I'm very curious as to how the research topic that you were researching aligns with other public health priorities in Accra.
Great question. I think in a bigger picture, this project really digs deeper to just the health system structure in Ghana. Because during our scoping visit, for example, we got to meet with representatives from their birth and death registration and their fire department, who also focus on rescue and safety in general. And we do see some gaps in how different organizations or different ministries are working towards a common goal, towards a common public health goal, in this case, safety, but also just child health, adolescent health. But there's so much fragmentation, really, and not really a common discourse that is happening. So this project really just brings together a lot of integration between the different fields, between the different public health problems, but also just builds a case for safety across the nation. So yeah, I think there's a lot of room and opportunity for different public health organizations and public health discourse to happen through this
I see.
project.
And one more question, if you do not mind.
Mhm.
I am very curious because I'm African myself, and I know as far as, data recording, it's not a very consistent process back from where we're from. So did you observe any limitations with your data? And if you did, how did you account for them in your research?
Right. Yeah, so a great example would be the CDC KNUST data, in which they were using data from their birth and deaths registration, but also conducting kind of like door to door, going from community to community, getting data on drowning incidents that have happened in their communities. And, their data accounted for more incidents than what is being reported at a global level. So there is a lot of discrepancy in terms of just systematically accounting for incidents that are happening. And part of why we also need a lot of community engagement is because most of these incidents that will be reported will be coming in from community members. And something interesting that we actually saw as well was that we found that people were reluctant to actually report drowning because it would point back to them as a suspect. And so that's also something that we need to be able to deal with in order to just bring in that sensitization, but also make people understand that this is a public health issue and a safety issue. And so if you are witnessing drowning, or you're noticing that there's drowning incidents that are happening in your community, then you are more than welcome to be able to communicate that and be able to report that without feeling that you're now going to be a suspect and be held accountable for that. So yeah, it's a lot of community engagement work, a lot of understanding some of the cultural perspectives around drowning as well, cultural perspectives about reporting in general, cultural perspectives about public health and safety. So it's a journey. It's a journey, and we're just hoping that this project will also just highlight some of those gaps in the system.
Wonderful. Great job, Ndondwa. Thank you.
Thank you, Ndondwa. You did a fantastic job. I enjoy your presentation a lot. And thanks for the questions. We are at time to go into the presentation of our fourth speaker. But once again, congratulations. Our fourth presenter is Tingxuan Yang. She is, during the program, her area of interest was maternal, fetal, and perinatal health. And Tingxuan came to the program with a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Michigan, where she majored in biology and statistics. And today she's going to give a presentation about hormone replacement therapy and cognitive outcomes using evidence from the UK Biobank. Tingxuan, I don't see. Oh, yeah, there you are. Okay. And we can see your slides, so mic is yours.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Tingxuan. I'm happy to share my research exploring the association between hormone replacement therapy use and cognitive outcomes after bilateral oophorectomy. Bilateral oophorectomy, defined as the surgical removal of both ovaries, results in an abrupt and permanent cessation of ovarian hormone production, particularly estrogen and progesterone. Due to the rapid loss of the endogenous hormone, bilateral oophorectomy is often associated with more pronounced physiological and neurological consequences. Based on national representative data, approximately 10.5% of US women between the ages of 20 and 84 reported having a history of bilateral oophorectomy. Hormone replacement therapy, also referred as menopausal hormone therapy, involves the use of estrogen alone or in combination with progestin. HRT has been hypothesized to influence long-term health outcomes, including cognitive aging, but evidence is inconsistent. Despite growing evidence, the association between HRT use and dementia among women with bilateral oophorectomy remains unclear. In this study, an important stratification variable is surgery timing, defined as age at bilateral oophorectomy. This categorization is used as a proxy for the hormonal environment at the time of surgery. The key idea is that the bilateral oophorectomy leads to an abrupt loss of ovarian hormones, but this loss occurs in very different hormonal contexts, depending on when the surgery happens. For example, women who undergo surgery at younger ages are typically at higher endogenous hormone levels, so the hormonal decline caused by surgery is both abrupt and substantial. In contrast, among women who undergo surgery at older ages, hormone levels may already experience a gradual decline and were kept at a lower level, so surgery may only cause a little additional decline. These differences in hormonal context may lead to differences in cognitive outcomes and may also influence how HRT use is associated with cognitive function. For the group labels, clinical terms such as premenopausal, peri, or postmenopausal were intentionally not used because age is only a rough proxy and does not fully capture the individual hormone status. The reason why I'm still using the age only, not including other symptoms in this classification, will be explained in a few minutes. Despite this relatively rough categorization, some meaningful and consistent trends were still observed. So now, the main hypothesis of this study is whether the association between HRT use and cognitive outcomes differs by timing of bilateral oophorectomy. Cognitive outcomes are assessed in two ways: incident dementia as the clinical endpoint, and FI score trajectory as a measure of longitudinal cognitive function. This study was conducted using data from the UK Biobank, a large population-based cohort of over 500,000 participants recruited across the United Kingdom between 2006 and 2010. The primary outcome is incident all-cause dementia, defined using ICD-10 codes. Cox regression models were used to examine the association between HRT use and dementia. The secondary outcome is fluid intelligence score, one of the cognitive function tests administered in the UK Biobank assessment battery, allowing us to capture longitudinal cognitive trajectories, higher scores indicating better cognitive functions. Repeated measurements were collected at up to 4 time points, so linear mixed effect models were used with a random intercept for each participant to account for within-person correlation among the repeated observations. For all analysis, 3 models were specified with increasing levels of adjustment. Because each covariate in the UK Biobank has some degree of missingness, Model 2 is used primarily as a robustness check, while Model 1 is used for the main result in presenting. Importantly, the results were consistent across all models, with no meaningful changes in directions or statistical significance. Detailed results from each models are reported and can be found in the full analysis and will not be shown in this presentation. In the overall model, HRT use was associated with a significantly lower risk of dementia, where the adjusted hazard ratio is 0.51 compared with non-users. Subgroup analysis showed that the magnitude of association varied across surgery timing. The strongest association was observed among women who had surgery at early phase when they were younger. The association was smaller among those who had surgery at transition phase, and among women who had surgery at late phase, no statistical significant association was observed. This variation cross-surgery timing was formally tested using an interaction term with a p-value of 0.044, indicating statistical significance, and that the association between HRT use and dementia risk was not uniform across surgery timing groups. The cumulative incidence curves help visualize this difference. Among women who underwent surgery at early phase, the curve for HRT users and non-users are clearly separated, and in the transition group, the curves are closer together, and among women who had surgery at late phase, the curve largely overlapped. One possible explanation for the observed heterogeneity relates to differences in the underlying hormonal environment at the time of bilateral oophorectomy. Women who had surgery at younger ages are typically still in a premenopausal stage with relatively high stable levels of hormonal level, so surgery will lead to sudden and substantial loss of hormones, which may increase long-term neurocognitive vulnerability. And the use of HRT after surgery may partially compensate for this loss, which may explain the separation of two curves. In contrast, women in transition phase are likely to already experience declining and fluctuating hormone levels. In this context, surgery may lead to a smaller additional drop in hormone levels. As a result, the magnitude of disruption caused by the surgery is less pronounced, and the potential benefit of HRT appears attenuated. Women undergoing surgery at late phase are likely to be near or beyond natural menopause when hormone levels are already low or relatively stable, so additional hormonal change induced by the surgery is minimal. Reintroducing exogenous hormone by HRT treatment may not confer substantial benefit and may even disrupt an already stable hormone state. Consequently, little differences in dementia risk is observed. The secondary analysis on FI score was intended to explore whether the association with HRT use is also reflected beyond the clinical endpoint of incident dementia. Cognitive decline may occur gradually and may not be fully captured by a dementia diagnosis alone. So FI score trajectories provide a complementary perspective on cognitive aging in this population. Although the three-way interaction was not statistically significant, the overall pattern of the predicted curves was broadly consistent with the dementia Cox analysis. The study has several limitations, but it also has some unique strengths. One important limitation is the lack of detailed information on HRT use. The UK Biobank does not capture hormone type, formulation, or dosage. So HRT exposure is defined in a simplified manner, which may mask heterogeneity across different treatment regimens. However, this limitation is closely tied to the scale of this cohort. The UK Biobank include a very large community-based population, which enhance generalizability, and the long-term follow-up makes it well-suited for studying outcomes like dementia, which developed over decades. Collecting highly detailed treatment information across hundreds of thousands of participants would substantially increase questionnaire burden and may compromise data quality. Another limitation is the one I've mentioned earlier, that using age as a surgery alone to approximate the menopausal stage is inherently imprecise. Ideally, symptoms indicators along with age may provide a more accurate assessment of menopausal stage. Some related measurements such as sleep quality and mental health assessment actually exist, but they were only assigned to a small portion of UKB participants, not all of the participants. and incorporating this assessment would substantially reduce the sample size. Given the relatively low incidence of dementia, further reductions in sample size would also limit statistical power to detect differences. Other limitations include potential selection bias and residual confoundings, which I won't go into detail here. Public health implementation. The main findings suggest that HRT use after bilateral oophorectomy is associated with lower dementia risk, and this association varies by surgery timing, with stronger associations observed among women undergoing surgery at younger ages. From a public health perspective, the heterogeneity highlights the potential importance of the hormonal context at the time of surgery, suggesting that paying greater attention to subgroup differences, especially across different life stages, may help inform more individualized counseling and post-surgical management. These findings also point to several directions for future research. First, more detailed information of HRT exposure can be used to better understand heterogeneity in observed association. Second, future research may try to incorporating direct measures of endogenous hormone levels at baseline where feasible. This could also help explicitly examine how the hormonal environment at the time of surgery may influence the association. Finally, it is important to emphasize that these findings are based on observational data and should not be interpreted as causal or used in clinical guidelines for the purpose of dementia prevention. Instead, they should be viewed as hypothesis generating, highlighting potential heterogeneity in association that warrants further investigation. I really appreciate the guidelines and the support from my reader, Dr. Wang, and my PI, Dr. Lee. I also grateful to all participants of the UK Biobank for making this research possible. And a special thanks to my friends Doris and Lydia. I couldn't have done this without you. I am very grateful for the opportunity to be part of the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. I'm happy to take any questions.
Great job, Tingxuan. I sent a heart emoji and I don't know why my background went all red, but that was funny. First time this happens. So we have a couple of minutes left. Let's see if there are any questions. So in the chat, I do see that you're getting congratulations, saying wonderful job. I don't see questions in the chat. Let me see if people have their hands up. I don't see any hands ups. Okay, I do have a question. So I thought oh wait, I see that Yunxing Li has her mic open and she opened her camera. So maybe she has a question.
So Tingxuan, great job. I do have a question in terms of the age of participants. Sorry, I probably missed the first part. So what's the youngest age included in your analysis?
The UK Biobank, including participants' age range from 40 to 70. So the youngest age would be 40 years old.
Yeah, so one consideration is like because for the dementia incidence that usually if it's not early onset, it usually happen after 65. So we maybe you could consider to look at people when they at baseline have a cut for baseline age, so allow them to possibly have dementia over the observation time. And another related question, not a question, just a comment for you to consider is like for people at baseline, they are older, then in some cases they may have death before the dementia occur. So you may also want to consider that in your analysis.
Thank you for your comments. For the first question, the cut point I'm using is by the age of surgery. So some participants may age for example, more than 50 years old at baseline, but their surgery time can be as early as less than 45 years old. And in the models, I've adjusted the baseline age. So I think this is how I deal with this problem. And for the second question, yes, one challenging in study dementia is that the individuals need to survive for many years, often decades, before dementia can be observed. And that is one of the reasons why, in addition to the clinical endpoint of dementia, I also examine the cognitive trajectory over time to capture more gradual changes in cognitive function. Thank you. Any other questions?
Great job, Tingxuan, and great job responding to those tough questions. We are at time, actually. It's 1:01, and we need to close this at 1. So I just want to ask everyone to give a big round of applause to the 4 presenters today. They did a wonderful job, and it is great to see what you do on your next steps as your career progresses. So thank you very much, everyone, and congratulations.